On April 20th, 1999, multiple firearms entered Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, where they killed 12 students and one teacher. While the massacre wasn't the first school shooting in history, it garnered the most attention since the University of Texas Tower shooting, where a sniper rifle picked off 15 lives back in 1966. That would change on April 16, 2007, when two pistols entered the Virginia Tech campus, where they claimed 32 lives and injured 17 others. The savagery would spread from school grounds to supermarkets, as it did on May 14, 2022, when an AR-15 style rifle walked into Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo, New York, where it claimed 10 lives. Of course, this framing is complete nonsense because guns don't kill people kill people. So why do we do so with vehicles? On January 11th of this year, Kaller Madenchek drove a moving truck into a crowd of protesters in Westwood, Los Angeles. But once the corporate press learned the driver was a pro-Iranian regime activist, they suddenly lost interest. No headlines screaming of innocent protesters being denied their First Amendment rights, no warnings of Islamic extremism destroying our democracy. Just a silly moving truck being a nuisance. To be fair, there were no serious injuries, with paramedics evaluating two people who declined further treatment, so the old no bleed, no lead adage applies here. But there are many examples where there were gallons of bleed, yet the media shifted their framing depending on the circumstances. Let's look at 5 examples of where this happened in an effort to reprogram the masses. Thanks for stopping by NPC Overrider, where we challenge mainstream source code to develop independent thought, one user story at a time. Grab your evening paper, and let's check out the latest programming. Number 5, Waukesha Christmas Parade Attack. On November 21st, 2021, Daryl Brooks, a black man who posted anti-white sentiments online, drove his SUV into a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, unlike Madenchek or the U-Haul, depending on what news outlet you work for, Brooks killed 6 people and injured more than 60. Yet, just as ridiculous as my aforementioned comparison to sentient firearms, PBS would have us believe that Brooks' car had a mind of its own, as if we were in some kind of Stephen King novel. Although Brooks killed innocent women and children ranging in age from 8 to 81 and permanently scarring dozens, both physically and mentally, NPR downplayed this massacre to a simple incident. Even after police publicly identified the killer on November 22nd, mainstream news outlets continued to cite the 2,000-pound weapon rather than the perpetrator in control. No concerns of racism, no mention of black supremacist violence. The arbiters of truth over at Wikipedia eventually came to grips with the fact that a human being killed and mangled these poor people, but shifted blame away from Brooks' racist rhetoric to his mental disorders. Only the readers that continued to the last paragraph would learn of Brooks' anti-white views. Let's contrast that with the Charlottesville, Virginia attack from 2017, where Alex Fields Jr. rammed his Dodge Charger through a crowd of counter-protesters at a Unite the Right rally. Unlike Brooks, Wikipedia immediately calls out Fields as a white supremacist in the first sentence. Granted, we're comparing a Christmas parade to a Unite the Right rally, but CNN wasted no time in advertising Fields' racist ideals. Number 4, congressional baseball shooting. On June 14th, 2017, James Thomas Hodgkinson Hodgkins, it's not a disease, although I guess you could argue he is, fired about 70 rounds at Republican congressmen, staffers, and spectators at a congressional baseball game for charity in Alexandria, Virginia. Thankfully, nobody lost their lives, although some, including then House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, suffered life-altering injuries, to say nothing of the psychological damage of the survivors. Although authorities publicly identified Hodgkinson on the same day as the attack, CNN directed our attention away from the crazed ideological madman and towards the victims. USA Today takes it a step further, calling the attack politically motivated, but it doesn't drill the shooter's left-wing ideology into readers' minds as it would if the tables were turned. Wikipedia admits the shooter is a left-wing activist, but not in the first sentence or even the first paragraph, as we would see if this were a right-wing psychopath attacking a group of Democrat ball players. Since we don't have a one-to-one example here, let's compare the attack to the 2020 Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, where nobody was hurt and the nab was never carried out. Why? Mostly because FBI agents orchestrated the whole thing, and non-FBI participants likely didn't have the know-how nor the resources to pull it off without the government's help. Still, the mainstream media would go on for months about the threat of right-wing extremism to scare the public. Number 3, New Orleans Bourbon Street attack. On New Year's Day 2025, Semshud Din Jabbar, a U.S. Army vet who converted to Islam and pledged allegiance to ISIS, drove a rented truck into a crowd of partygoers, killing 14. Wikipedia admits in the first line that Jabbar was Islamist domestic terrorist, so we'll give credit where credit is due. Yet while searching for news articles between 1/1 and 1/7/2025, we see few articles from the mainstream media warning people of the rising violence from Islamic extremism. In a follow-up CNN article posted on December 30th, 2025, about a year later, the writer continues to call the attacks a, quote, vehicle ramming, with no mention of Islamic terrorism. What should I do with this white space behind me? Number 2, Summer of Love. Following George Floyd's death in 2020, Americans watched in horror as night after night, violent left-wing extremists wreaked havoc from coast to coast, particularly in places like Minneapolis and Portland. Ideologically driven psychopaths laid waste to private citizens and property, burning down businesses, many of which were minority-owned, for over 100 days. Yet the media consistently framed these riots as, quote, fiery but mostly peaceful protests that just happened to turn violent. We didn't see them described as left-wing terrorists as we would if they were, quote, white supremacists burning down the country. Yet on May 29, 2020, domestic terrorists gathered outside the White House where they breached barricades and fought with law enforcement, prompting the Secret Service to usher President Trump into a bunker. The Daily Beast would call Trump a coward for doing so. Days later, extremists set fire to St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C. But you've probably never heard of a, quote, 529 insurrection. Yet you would hear about a January 6 insurrection for years to come, still to this day, with people like Kamala Harris comparing the day to Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Number 1, Justice Brett Kavanaugh attempted kidnapping. Nicholas Roski, who now goes by Sophie, if you can imagine that, flew from California to Maryland, legally transporting a handgun, knife, zip ties, and other tools, intending to kidnap, torture, and kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh back in 2022, as reported. After arriving at Kavanaugh's home with his murder kit in hand, he realized several U.S. Marshals were posted outside the residence. After speaking with his sister, Roski called 911 and reported he was having a mental crisis and he was arrested without incident. Yet the mainstream media framed this attempt as a, quote, armed man arrested near Kavanaugh's home, and again focused on his mental issues rather than his ideologically driven intent. Compare that to the 2022 attack on Paul Pelosi and we see a significant difference in media framing. Almost immediately, CNN pointed to Republicans for their, quote, culpability in fostering a poisoned political environment. Don't make me choke on my methylene blue. Admittedly, the Pelosi attack was much more violent. There's that old media motto once again. Still, the corporate press ensured we saw the Pelosi attacker's conspiratorial social media post and Speaker Nancy Pelosi's grief over her husband's injuries for months to come. All right, let's wrap this up and check out the final patch. As despicable as these examples may be, perhaps Victoria Adele's article in People magazine regarding Scott Adams takes the cake. I'd say literally if you've seen her picture. After Scott Adams, creator of the legendary Dilbert comic strip, passed away on January 13th of this year, she couldn't help but politically frame the piece. Adams received flack for going on a, quote, racist rant in 2023 for commenting on a poll saying nearly half of all black people are not okay with white people, adding he didn't want anything to do with them. Much less attention was paid to the poll results themselves. Yet O.J. Simpson's death announcement from the same magazine received no negative headline qualifiers regarding his armed robbery and kidnapping convictions or his internationally known murder trial. We could go on. It seems this stuff happens weekly. Just days ago, leftist activists interrupted a church service which violates the same law that sent multiple nonviolent protesters to prison for squatting in an abortion clinic and silently praying. When we think of brainwashing, we conjure up images of forced manipulation like we saw in A Clockwork Orange. But in reality, all you have to do is turn on the news. Well, that's going to do it for this version of NPC Overrider. I'm your lead engineer, Greg. All references are available through the release notes. If you want to help me save the NPCs, please set the like button to true and open up a ticket in the comments section if you have an idea for a future release. But for now, we're going to shut down and grab ourselves a beer. Have a good one.